Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to 2024. A happy New Year to all of you. I hope you had a great time in the year end and then starting fresh in the new year. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about setting up the Azure function high availability with Traffic Manager. There are a little bit of things we need to work. Though it is straightforward in the concept, but while we set it up, we need to make sure that certain things are set up properly, and I'll explain why they're set up like that. And I will have a very detailed demo around how to set it up in the context of Azure. So let me begin by telling you what all we need for this demo, right? So this is a pretty slow moving demo. So I will be creating every individual component in front of you so that you can follow along with me and then also set it up by yourself. As we are talking about high availability, we need two Azure functions. When we create Azure function, we need to make sure they are deployed in app services plan as a standard, not the consumption based model. And then we will have to configure these app services against a custom domain that we will take care. And after that, we will create a traffic manager and then put these two app services, which are functions, behind this traffic manager and proceed further. So let's see how this looks like. Now, this is a word of caution. This is a lengthy, slow moving demo, and this is a bumpy exercise. So things might not work as expected. I will try to fix things, but don't get let's say frustrated if when you are trying to do that, if things are not working. This could be many different reasons, because there's a custom domain, so the data may not be propagated. You might have to wait for some time to get things reflected, and all these things might so happen. But I do have a setup similar to what I'm going to show now. If let's say my demo fails, I'll fall back to the already created one and then walk you through the places I made changes so that you have the idea about it. But let's try. Okay, let's try doing that. Before we jump into that, I want to draw something in front of you for us to understand what exactly we're going to achieve, right? So though we discussed about it in the agenda, but let me try to draw it in the slide. So always when you work on Azure, right? So you need a resource group. So let's assume that this is the resource group where your resources are. Now, as I said that you need a function app or Azure functions. Let's name it as F1. And this needs to be part of an app service plan, which is basically a dedicated module. So we call it app service plan in Azure. Let's say this is plan number 1. And let's say this is deployed in East US. We will in fact deploy this in East US. And we can create a similar function with the same endpoints in, let's say, West Europe. And then we name it as F2. So these two are independent functions. If you call them independently, they will be able to respond with the result you are looking for. Now we'll create some, let's say, dummy functions within the function just to test if this is a working fine or not. But eventually, this is how you're planning to deploy. So this is your two separate regions where these two are available. Now we need, as we said, that we need a domain, custom domain, right? So let's say it looks like www.contoso.com, and we'll configure these two. And when you hit this URL, it will reach the function app through this domain controller setup. That setup we will do. And then we need a traffic manager, Azure Traffic Manager, that will basically help us identify who is the healthy one and then route our traffic. So imagine if you choose this East US as your primary location. Now, as long as this is up and running, the traffic manager will redirect your traffic to this. That's the work of traffic manager. But the moment this is down due to something, then the traffic will get redirected to this. This is what we're going to achieve by setting it up, right? So let's begin by creating, let's say, the function app, and then we will create the the domain, and then we'll create the traffic manager. I will configure all of them. So this is sort of to an idea to have what we are going to do next. So that because when we work on Azure portal or some script, it doesn't give that pictorial representation. So this whiteboarding ability helps us retain what we are going to do now. Now let's move on. Okay. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to switch to my demo machine. So let me do that in a moment. And then I will show everything in the Azure portal through Azure portal. So when you have an Azure portal, right, and then you are working on Azure portal to create things, it becomes a bit easier. But in the typical real life scenario, we don't do it. We use the DevOps pipeline. So a lot of time I get a comment that, can you show us the DevOps pipeline? DevOps is more of an automated way, but until unless we understand what we are trying to achieve, we can't really design our DevOps pipeline. So let's focus on Azure portal because it's a learning exercise. Okay. So what I have done already, I've created a blank resource manager, right? So let me open it up here. So you can see that this is a blank resource manager I have created. Um, I gave a name as function app traffic manager as the resource manager name. In that resource manager, I'm going to create, let's say, the first function app. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say function app. If you select the function app, it gives you a couple of options. So let's create them. Okay. And then if I go to this RG function app traffic manager, that's the resource group we are going to use. And I'll say that hopefully this is available, right? And I'm also going to check if the second one is also available. They're fine. So we'll use this. I'll use code. I can choose the runtime as .NET. You can select any. Version 6, EastUS, and select Linux. And then I'm going to select not the consumption, but the app service plan. When I select the app service plan, there are a couple of plans available already, right? So you can create a new one. App is VC plan East US. Okay. And then I will select probably the standard one. You can choose premium, but it'll cost you a lot. So for the demo, we can still live with the standard one. Standard one will allow you to configure the app service with custom domain. Okay. So we'll select that cheaper one. So it's still not very cheap. It's $69.35. So whenever you use the resources, you need to make sure that you know how much you're going to pay. So this is the amount you're going to pay at the end of the month. And you can see that a function app needs a storage to retain its code and a lot of things. We don't want to configure the basic diagnostic setting. Storage will be automatically created, and I'm going to enable the public access, enable the network injection, enable the application insight. No, I don't want. And then I go ahead and then say, I want to enable the GitHub action for CI/CD. No, not required at this point in time. We're not focusing on function. We're just creating a dummy function. And then once everything looks fine, we'll go ahead and hit create, right? So the function app will be created in a moment. While it is getting created, let's create a traffic manager. It should be very quick. So if I go ahead and go to the same resource group and say traffic manager profile. And traffic manager is a global deployment. So though it would ask you to choose a resource group, that's where, and the resource group is located in a region, it only stores the metadata. It doesn't store anything in that resource group. So I'll say WG traffic M. Hopefully this is a unique URL dot trafficmanager.net, and you can choose the routing method as performance weighted priority. I'll choose performance because it will see that one is healthy, not healthy, then it will fall back to the other one. Round robin will keep moving between two. So, and then this is the subscription, and I will select the resource group because then it needs to store the metadata in that resource group. So I'll go ahead and create the traffic manager. This is a very quick creation process. Soon it will be done. But while it is getting created, let's create the domain, the custom domain. So you can use your own custom domain purchased from the third-party provider like GoDaddy.com, but I'll use the app service domain provider. So in Azure, we have something called app service domains. It allows you to create domain from within Azure. So let me create that. And this is the resource group. So I will use the same resource group and I will give a domain name. So the name of the domain is TM Traffic Manager Demo. This is .com and this is available. So this looks okay. This domain is available. And then now I have to fill out the form. So let me do that for you. And then I go ahead and provide a couple of information. Now this is where I need to hide the screen because I'm going to provide some personal information. So let me finish it off and then come back. Okay. So I set the phone number, I set the address, and then I set country, and I choose the territory, and then I choose the city, and I choose the postal code. All right. So the next step, let me bring it back. The next step is where I'm gonna provide like privacy protection enabled. Auto renewal is by default disabled, so I'll just move ahead with that. Tag, and then it will validate. And it will cost me around 12 United States dollar per year per domain. Okay, so it's your basically create, and it's gonna go ahead and create it, right? So it's basically it's kind of kickstarted the process. This will define the domain once this is done. So we'll come back. Now let's see the progress here. Um, the web app service plan is created. The function number one is created. So you can see now the function number one is up and running. While we can see that it is up and running and the traffic manager is also up and running, let me create one more function app. Now we'll follow the same process as we have done for the function one. We'll create wgfunc2 and then we'll create it within an app service plan and keep it like that, right? So let's just this thing come alive. Go to this resource group, create another function app. And inside that resource group, I can now see that function app. And then if I just go ahead and hit create, it's gonna go ahead and let's say create the function app. and I'll say wgfunc2. Okay, and the URL will be .azurewebsites.net, and I'll choose the same one, .net 6, doesn't matter, right? And then this is not East US. This will be West Europe. Okay, and then I'll select Linux because it's a thing, and then I'll choose the app service plan, and I'll create a new app service plan, app svc plan 2. Okay, that's the name of the plan I've given, and then I will also select standard S1. Okay, so let me go ahead and select this one. Once you select the standard S1 and everything looks fine, go ahead and create a storage. Go to the networking. We're not going to enable, enable the public access application site. No, don't need that. It should ideally be in the production, but for this demo, we don't need application inside. Tags, review and create, and you can see that it shows you the details. Have service plan, West Europe, that's important, that putting in a different region, and then I'm gonna hit create. While it will take some moment to create it, let me check the traffic manager is created, so it's fine. Let me see that what all other resources are created in that resource group. So we have also the DNS zone created, right? So that means we are good at this point in time. Let me see the progress. If there is anything, nothing as of now showing up here. Record set is saved, and this is saved, and all these things looks all right. Okay. Now, if I come back to the first function, let's create a function, okay? Because we need to test it. So we can do it in the Visual Studio Code, write a detailed function, put a complex logic, and then host it, but we are not going to do that. We'll use a default template as an HTTP endpoint and then put something which is identifiable. So we'll use this portal to create that function. Now you can see that it is a new function. So I can give a name called hello. That's the name of the function. And we choose the authorization level as anonymous and create. Okay, so the function will be created and visible in this list once this is created. Once this code is ready, I can even change the code. So this, remember, this is the func1. So I will identify that from where this is getting called, right? Is it a func1? Is it a func2? So let's say here, fun function one is called. So this basically identifying that function was is getting called. I'll save it. You can even test it, right? So you can go back to the get the function URL and copy the URL. And if you hit run here and then paste it, you're gonna see that this is kind of showing you that it is the function one is getting triggered. So my basically the function which I'm gonna test is working fine at this point in time. So, and then I'll come back to this second function. It is also deployed pretty fast. And then I'll follow the same process. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to just create another function called with the same name called hello. So that when I call this function, I all do not have to change the URL. It's the following URL, trailing URL. I can use just to change the name and it will just switch. That's how we'll be able to. So in fact, if you have func2 and then if you say that API hello like that, it's not going to show you anything because there's nothing. So it'll try and come back and then fail. But let's just go ahead and create a function. This is loading. So let me try loading it faster. Yeah, I'll create a function. Same function I'm going to create. Okay, same approach. I go into the HTTP trigger. So I have to call the function to get that result. So I'll say hello. And then I'm going to choose the function authorization level as anonymous. So let's create that. So this is again created, and in the code, I'm going to make some changes calling out that function2 is called, so that when our traffic manager switches between function1 to function2, you know which function is getting called. Ideally, in a real scenario, you don't see that difference because they are doing the same thing. So I'll say function2 is called, and I will put a different dollar, 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 not dollar, maybe star, 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 and I save it, and I get the URL, and you can see that it is not working because I tested it earlier. Now it should show you that function2 is called, just to identify that. So this is a very simple function, okay? At, so we have now both the functions ready. So let me go back to this diagram. This one is ready. This one is ready. Traffic manager is ready. Our domain is ready. Now let's configure the traffic manager before we configure the domain. So we'll go to the traffic manager option. That's the middle one. And then I'm gonna, let's say, open this. So I'm gonna check the configuration, what we have done. So we have done a performance. It's a DNS protocol is this, fine. I'll go to the endpoints and I'll try to add here. And in this, you have a couple of options. So because these are all app services, part of my Azure subscription, I'll use Azure endpoint, and I'll say func1, just to identify this is the function number 1, and this is an app service. So I'll select that, and you will see that in that resource group I am working on, there are two functions. One is East US and another is West Europe. So I'll choose the East US, and then I will just enable it. So it basically gonna check the traffic health and all these things. So I'll say always serve the traffic, or I can just leave enable. So the health check will come into play and then do the health check. So I can say always traffic. Let's just go ahead and then save some time. If that takes time, then it'll basically wait for the traffic manager to get enabled. So the monitoring status says unmonitored. We can anyways come back and change these things, right? So we'll see that if we need to change, we'll change. But let's say I go to this func2, choose again the app service, choose the func2, which is West Europe, and then I will say always serve traffic. Okay. So these two are kind of configured. Now, interestingly, if you go to this traffic manager overview page where the URL is, and you copy this URL, and let's say you try to run it here. So let me put a window a little smaller size, and then I hit this traffic manager. It's gonna give you some error because it's going to tell you like it's not configured for HTTPS, and then it lands to one of the functions. Okay, this lands to one of the functions which we don't know yet. And then if we say that API slash hello, it is going to hit the function2. See here, function2 is called, not the function1, because probably the function2 is more healthier than function1. It can change depending on the situation. So if you happen to, let's say, go back, this is the function1. And if you happen to go back to this resource group, go to the function2, and you stop this function, let's say function2, it will be stopped. So I will stop the function2, and then I come back here, and let's say, come back into this. So let me bring that up here. Where is that? Mm, we're calling that in a small window. So let me bring that back again. All right. So if I copy again this traffic manager URL, paste it, say API, say hello, it is not getting into that. So there is some issue, right? Because I have stopped it and it's not switching. So there could be some challenges with this kind of setup. Now, if we go back and come to this function 2 and start again, eventually this should start working after some time once this kind of replicates and all this propagation happens. So because these things are basically, so you'll find a different behavior. Now we are going to change this behavior to something more interesting approach, right? Um, what we're going to do now is that we're going to go to this um, function one. And in that, if you identify that there's a custom domains, and if you see here that is a verification ID and there is a new IP address. Let me go back to home. This, yeah, I wanted to make sure that I'm on the right function app. If you come over here in the custom domain, because you have configured the kind of like the custom domain for the traffic manager, you can see that it's coming over here. Now what we are gonna do is that if you can click on add binding, just leave it like that and validate. And if the validation works and I say add, this might give you a problem. Let's see how it works. So we'll see the progress here. And you see that it's running. Eventually, it might give you an error. While we're trying with the function 1, let's go and check the function app 2. Okay. So if I go to the custom domains, you will also find the traffic manager here, and you can click on add binding, but let's see what it offers in the function 1. Now, while it is doing things with the function 1, let's configure the function 2. So I'll say add custom domain and then say all other domain, app services managed certificate, SNI, and here I'm going to give a name to the domain. So the domain, if you remember, that I created, so let me go back and let's go to this traffic manager, this thing resource group, and this is the domain I was referring to. So this is the domain. Okay. So if I go here, and if I now you notice here, the moment I add the root domain, that's the root one, so it uses the IP address of the function app. When I add subdomain, that's www, it's gonna go ahead and use this mapping with function app, and there will be an identifier which is the custom domain verification ID. These two value needs to be in your domain register. So I'm using Azure, that's why it is in Azure, but in your case it will be something which is in Azure. So this ASUID www, if I copy and then I go here, it's not yet present. So I'll add this one here as a txt record. So you can see that it is telling me to add the txt record. So I'll go ahead and add a txt record, and I'll just leave it as it is, and then I will copy this value. That's a big value. I'm going to copy it here, and I'm going to say okay. So this is the step number one. Step number two is that I go ahead and also need to add as a CNAME record here. So I add the CNAME record to my domain register. And because I'm going to use the traffic manager, I'm not going to provide the URL of the function app. Let's see what I need to provide. So I say CNAME, and then in this CNAME record, I'm going to go back to this function app, go to this traffic manager. I copy the traffic manager DNS, and I come back and set the value here. So, and I'll explain you why I'm doing it, not the function app. So you see that traffic manager is kind of getting pointed when you say www.regutmdemo.com. It's going to hit the traffic manager, and then let the traffic manager decide which is the right function to call, and then it'll be called. Okay. So I'll say okay. So this is going to come over here. So you see two things here, right? One is www.cname pointing to the traffic manager is ID2. So this is what I have done with what? With this value. So now if I say validate, you will find that these two, because these two values are there in the domain register, they will give you something. And it also tells you if you are using traffic manager, make sure to point the CNAME record. That's what I exactly did. Okay. And I hit add. It's going to go ahead and add that to this. So while it is doing that, let's go back to the function app and say that the binding is done for this one also, right? So traffic manager binding is kind of happened without any trouble. Now, if I may go back and do the same thing over here, right? I'll say all other domain services certificate, and then I use this traffic manager URL in that add custom domain. Not this one, sorry. This one. I need to add this one in the custom domain. So let me add that. You see that a record will be visible because by default it's a root. So instead of that, I'll say www, then it shows you the func. So this is just like a validation record, but in my domain register. So if I may show you again, it's already configured. So this value remains the same. So if you notice this value, let's show you, it ends with CFD0E. And if I go to this, in this value also, if I copy and paste it, and I just bring this here. So you see that last part of this data, maybe I'll put it in Notepad, is same. Okay, so I am fine. And I'll say validate. It'll go and get check and say it looks fine. And it'll go ahead and add. Once you are able to add that, if you go back to this, func2, you see that it is secure, created, and I am not going to add this binding. That's fine. I can also add, but let's just skip it. So now you have this, let's say, traffic manager profile configured against your two app service plan, which are hosting two function app in two different regions. Okay. And if you look into the function app, which we just now configured, it is now configured to a custom domain, which means that essentially in the custom domain, you say that use this domain, and in the domain register, you are basically routing them to the traffic manager. So that's the key here, right? So you are going to hit the custom domain. It is going to hit the traffic manager. Then the traffic manager will route this value to the other thing. So essentially, you don't need this binding here, right? So if you want to remove, you can remove it, but let's just keep it. And then if you, let's say, see over here, that's also the function number one and the function number two looks healthy. Now, if I may go to the traffic manager URL and hit the URL, it's not going to work. What may gonna work is this one. So if I copy this URL and then I open the small window which I was playing with here, and if I may now put this and hit enter, it's gonna end up in one of the function apps. Okay, and if you say that API PI hello, it's gonna go to call the function 2. All right, that's all right. So what is going to happen now if I stop the the function 2? Let's, is it this function 2? And then I say that I'm gonna go ahead and go to this function, click on overview, try to stop it. Okay, and in the meantime, I'm going to show you something else. So let me give a quick second. I will bring an URL that will tell us the health of our endpoint. Okay, so let me both pull that URL, paste it over here. Yes. All right. Now in this URL, I'm gonna use my custom domain name, and the custom domain is this one. And if I copy this and paste it here, and I say dig, and you can see that a little down, it shows you the hop. So it hits that domain, goes to trafficmanager.net, that traffic manager. Traffic manager then finds that function one is active because I stopped the function two. Okay, that's why the function was showing active. And then it will point you to the function one, will point to its deployment. This is all internal to Azure, right? So that's how the functions DNS is pointing to the right server is pointing to the another right server, so on and so forth. Finally, an IP address is getting hit, right? So that's the kind of, let me, if you put it this colorize, that will give you better view, all right? So now you can see that better. So you have this URL hitting the traffic manager, hitting the function, hitting the server. So that's how the hop is happening. So this is how your custom domain is configured. Now, the moment you call this custom domain, like I'm calling here, it was calling the function 2. And if it is working correctly fine at this point in time, sometime this, so you can see now, this is now calling function 1. Why? If you look into the function 2, it is stopped because the start button is enabled. If I may go back to the function 1, and I show you that it is going to enable the stop button, not the start button. That means it is running. So it'll say running status is showing here. In the function 2, it is stopped. Because the function 2 is stopped, now my traffic manager is now falling back to function 1 and calling the function 1. The API I'm calling, the URI, that is a slash API slash hello, is telling me which function is getting called. So that's why I can identify what is getting called. But if you notice here in the hopping window also, this also tells that it has switched to function 1. Now what I can do, I can go here and stop the function 1, then both the functions are no more working, right? So traffic manager is unable to find any healthy endpoint, hence it is not going to proceed. So it will definitely give an error if both the functions are down. But if I go ahead and start, let's say function 2, eventually traffic manager will start pointing this to the function 2. But you won't find this in the third party URL like this immediately reflecting those values, because this is a domain data propagation. Generally txt record is 1 hour time, TTL, time to live. So it might take longer than expected. So you might find that it's still pointing to, oh, it's pointing to function 2 quite fast. You can see now it is pointing to function 2. So let's see the output. So if I now hit this URL, refresh it, it's gonna go give me an error. Let me open in a fresh window. Should point to the function 1. Now that's why this failover is happening, because one of the function is right now not working or stopped. It could be anything. It could be a maintenance. It could be a disaster. It could be an hardware failure. It could be problem with the code deployment. It could be anything, and because of which you're unable to do that. But you see that because the traffic manager is constantly monitoring both the functions, then now the domain is going to the traffic manager, which will always go, but this time it is going to fall into the function 2, and then function 2 is pointing to its actual server where it is deployed, and then so on and so forth, right? So this is how you are going to configure your routing for the function app, which is deployed in app service plan and configured against a custom domain, and then you can switch route things between the functions, right? So if I may go back to this drawing board, what we did, let me start pointing to that. We did create function 1, we then created function 2, we then created a domain. So you can have it outside Azure also, like GoDaddy. We created a traffic manager. We configured this for both function 1 and function 2. And then we kind of CNAMEd it to traffic manager DNS, right? We are not CNAMEd. We haven't CNAMEd the contoso.com domain to one of our function apps. We didn't do that. The traffic manager takes care of routing. It finds what is healthy, not healthy, and whatever kind of routing mechanism you have chosen while creating the traffic manager, which is a round robin, performance, weighted, and all these things. And then it decides to, to pick either one or two and then proceeds with it, right? So it's kind of like the web approach which you have taken here to do that. Now you can see that it is kind of going into function app 2. Now if I may go back and start the function 1, this thing might change because I've seen immediately getting reflected. So if I hit dig, might not change as well. So it's not always immediate. It changed to function 1 because traffic manager is pretty quick in that sense. Now if you hit this URL, this www.reutmdemo.com, it will hit the function app1. So that's kind of like the way forward. So let me try doing that. It's gonna go ahead and do that. Now, with this, I want to end the discussion here and hope you were able to identify the way forward, how you can enable high availability with two or more Azure functions with Traffic Manager. As I said, some things extra which is not very clear always. You may need to do the thought of doing the recording, and I hope it was helpful. Thank you very much, and have a great day.